Start in a moment. Wonderful. So the next subject we're going to look at today is sociocracy. And what I'll do is I'll try and keep this a little bit shorter. So we have 10 minutes at the end to have some questions. And you can also ask questions maybe about dragon dreaming at the same time. So yeah, like we were saying with the dragon dreaming, all tools were created to solve and fix a problem. So sociocracy is no different. Sociocracy has a long history. In fact, the idea, the concept, the term itself was actually coined over 100 years ago, at the same time that the word sociology, and by the same person who actually coined the phrase sociology. And what he said at that time, over 100 years ago, is that the world is not ready for this. But he said that it's inevitable that at some point the world will be ready for a decision-making process that allows individuals to make decisions for themselves rather than other people having to make decisions for everybody. So at the moment with our kind of democracies, we give our power to somebody else to make decisions on our behalf. But as we can see, they make decisions that do not really represent the majority of us. They make decisions to go to war. They make decisions to do all kinds of things that really do not resonate with the majority of people. And so very clearly, democracy is not working. It is not serving humanity, and it's definitely not serving the planet and taking care of our environment and so on and so forth. So there's so sociocracy, as I say, was invented as a process, as a tool, a set of tools that can help to really bring about a decision-making process that really helps us to meet all of our needs, to be able to hear everyone's voice, to hear everyone's needs, and to find where is that kind of really creative, find really creative ways in which we can all meet all of our needs, and so we can all move together and in kind of harmony. So it first started getting implemented in schools back in the 1920s. The first people started thinking about how this might actually come into, how it might look back in the 1890s. So almost 120, 130 years ago, they started thinking about what this might look like. And in the 1920s was when it was first implemented into schools. Then one of the students from one of those schools then said, wow, I can bring this into business. And then started implementing in business is in the 1960s, and which is roughly the kind of the variation that most people are kind of using, something that is similar to that. But having said that, even in the last 5 to 10 years, that's also kind of evolved to kind of meet the kind of modern needs, which is a lot more, to be a lot more flexible in terms of rather than just being for groups which are really kind of fixed, such as a business, a company, but what about like voluntary sector workers, people who are volunteers in projects that let's face it, most of us activists are so passionate about what we do that we put so much time and energy into many different projects that we don't really have enough time for ourselves, or we don't have enough time to really do all of those projects justice. And so it's really easy for us to burn out because we just try our hardest to make each one work. And it becomes really problematic, and especially if you've got some tension in some of your projects and some of your groups, it really starts to get, as say, It can be very draining. So if we think about some of the, maybe let me ask you, what are some of the biggest problems that you face when you, for example, go to a meeting and try to make some decisions? What are some of the typical things? Let's see if we can pick 3 or 4 out that you see happens very, very often. A group of people come together to try and make some kind of a decision. What are some of the real points that really make you Alkis?
The one I've encountered most often and in the most variations is some kind of time pressure. There is either too little time to really discuss in length, in full, what we need to decide on, or to be fully aware of all the parameters, or
Mm-hmm.
there is a time pressure on making a decision or
Right.
taking action.
And what you find is some people think very, 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 very fast, and others need a lot more time to contemplate and understand and think about all of the. And so, so those who want to just rush ahead because they've thought it through and really quickly, and those others are like, whoa, hang on. And so there's tension there, very, very real. What other situations do you find? Donna?
Usually, I find lack of confidence and get spoken over, and it's your responsibility, I know, to talk up, but sometimes you don't feel like you can, or you notice that's happening to other people too.
Exactly. So we see either people's voices just not being heard, or when they try to express themselves, people shout them down. And on the flip side, you see some people who are very, very confident and very strong and very and pretty much impose their ways onto other people. And because they look so confident, they look so strong, and they're very, very quick in finding the answers, that many other people think, wow, this person really knows what they're doing. Ooh. But for the person but what we really find actually it's the quieter ones who often think things through, work things out, and can see the holes in the person who just speaks. Quite often, not always, but quite often, they just react without necessarily really understanding all of the implications. And so the quieter people quite often see and understand things much better. And so if we don't hear their voice, we potentially run into big problems because we just get carried away with this really charismatic, loudmouth, person, really confident person. So so these are very, very common problems. And so the way that Sociocracy works is, first of all, similar to Dragon Dreaming, the first thing we need to do is to really create a common dream. And we can even use the dreaming circle, and I do this very often. I use the dreaming circle from Dragon Dreaming to get together our common vision, mission, and aims. So again, we'll ask people, what needs to happen in this project to make you really passionately want to be involved for the next 3 years, or however long you want to define that for. And in doing so, we all express what's really deep in our hearts. And if we build a project around that, or at least start the project around that, this is a really good solid start. The other thing that actually, while I'm thinking of it, what you actually realize in reality is very often people at the very beginning of a project will tell you what they think you want to hear, not necessarily what they truly, genuinely want, because we're pack animals. We want to be part of the pack. We want to be part of a herd, and so you want to find you don't want to seem like you're really different. You want to be liked by everyone. So you say things very often that will make, oh yeah, sure, of course you're part of us. Yeah, come on in. And so there's this tendency for people not to genuinely speak their mind right at the beginning. And the way that I deal with this is that we start the project with that initial dream, but then we deliver a really quick, easy part of a project. Right, let's just get something done. Let's not sit and think and dream about, and make a project plan for what's going to happen in the next 5 years. What's going to happen in the next 2 weeks? What's going to happen in the next 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? Let's get one thing done. And in the process of doing that one thing, we get to learn about each other. We get to have fun. We get to deliver something. We get to do something tangible. But most importantly, we learn about each other. We get to learn to trust each other. And so in this process, we then, once we start trusting each other, we can then go back to this vision and say, right, actually, Donna, I saw in you when you were doing that. Oh my word, your eyes lit up so much. You never told us you love this. But wow, I could see it's totally in your heart to do this particular aspect of it. Now that I know that, we can bring that into the project. What you didn't mention it before, but now I can really clearly see it. So let's build that in. So we learn about each other, and we can now bring this into our project so we can really, really move our project in a really creative way. So the first part of Sociocracy is to create a common vision, a common goal, and how we're going to do it. And we maybe even create some kind of a culture. What is the kind of way that we actually want to work together? So for example, how to encourage each other. What is it that we do to make sure that everyone is heard? What is it we do to make sure that if anyone has some kind of a challenge, a difficulty, that it gets expressed and we joyfully look at it together and see how we can all work really creatively to make sure that this challenge is no longer a challenge, and really support you to move through it so that you can really feel really good and really positive about the project. So yeah, so in Sociocracy, we have our vision, our mission and aims, and some kind of a culture. Typically, we then try to deliver some kind of a project. We then learn from that so that the next iteration, next part of the project really evolves more closely to what we actually really, truly in our hearts want, as opposed to what we said that we wanted at the beginning. And so that even the end goal can change as you're going on, as long as we all agree to it, as long as we all consent to it. So regarding the decision-making processes, which is what Sociocracy is really amazing at, is we make sure that now we know what the vision and mission is, vision, mission, and aims are. Every decision we make is now based against, does this proposal that someone is coming forward with help us to get to that end goal, or does it take us away from it? We're not asking you, is the proposal in front of us the most perfect, most complete? Is it the way that you would do it? All we're asking when we're asking for consent is, can you see any logical, rational reason as to why this proposal that Alkis has put in front of us is any reason as to why it will not help us to get to our end goal? We don't want to know if you've got a better solution at this problem, for the problem at this particular time. We just want to know, is there any reason why this amazing, beautiful process that Alkis has gone through with a small group of other people who are interested in this, the proposal that he's made for us, is there any reason as to why this could be dangerous, why it could fail, why it could not happen? And if not, you consent to it. Or you basically, if you see a reason as to why actually this might not work, then you object to it. And then you have to justify your objection, and everyone else has to agree, wow, yes, thank you so much for pointing that objection out. Yes, now we can see you're right, that probably will not work. Thank you for saving us from making that mistake. So we celebrate the fact that someone has put an objection, a valid objection in our way. So thank you, because that would have been so embarrassing if we had done that. And so thank you for bringing up that objection. But if you don't have an objection, if you can't see any reason as to why that will fail, then you consent. Or you say, I have no objection. They're both the same. And so in doing this, there's also a third answer you could give, which is consent with a concern, which is kind of saying, I'm not entirely sure. There's something bugging me. I can't put my finger in, I can't give you a really clear reason as to why this won't work, but there's something inside me says we should be a little bit cautious about this. So I'm not going to stop it. I hope it is going to work, but I just want to raise the fact that I have a little bit of a concern. What we can then do, so basically, if that is the case, then the proposal goes ahead and it's sanctioned. But what we could then do is we could then take this concern and say, let's have a look at this. Let's see, can we work with this? Is there any truth behind this? And maybe we make some kind of a counter plan as to how maybe we address that. So it could be to add some kind of a feedback loop in. All right, so Andreas, given that you had this concern, would you mind over the next 2 months of this project is just really keeping a close eye on if this particular situation happens, and if you see it happen, bring it back. You know, if you see it's not going the way that we want it to go, let us know so that we can then adjust it somehow. And so we build some kind of a feedback loop in to just check, just in case that. And so we use these concerns creatively, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we get the project up and running as quickly as possible, but in as safe a way as possible. So to get things done and to move forward, but to do it kind of iteratively and to do it in a way that brings everyone with us. So ultimately, we all want to succeed in this project. So all we're looking to do is we're looking to take away any obstacles from us succeeding. And what we don't do is we don't need to project plan the entire thing from start to finish. We don't need to know every single step. We just need to know what's the next major step or the next few steps we can take to move us in the right direction. And at every step, let's get that feedback. Is it working? Is it doing what we thought it would do? Or is it, have we missed something here? And so in this way, and I'm just going to quickly check to see how we're doing for time. And I've lost my timetable now. Is it this one perhaps? So we're supposed to be ending this at 45. So we've got about 10 minutes. Wonderful, thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to start wrapping this up and then ask for any questions and answers so that, yeah, and you can also ask questions about Dragon Dream. So yeah, it's a really beautiful creative process. It's not a full blown out, let's spend 3 years making a project plan and get every single detail right. No, let's put the vision together as quickly as possible, you know, and if you see many projects may take, months to put even just their vision together. And then having done all that work, then they kind of throw it away and don't actually use it. It's just something that they just did, a process. Whereas in Sociocracy, we can make a vision in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever it takes. Just really quickly get something that's good enough for now and that is safe to try. Does this really awkwardly but just about good enough kind of statement that we put together represent your view? If we deliver a project based on this, really quickly put together idea, does this excite you? Does it meet your needs? We can change it later, we can adjust it, we can modify afterwards, but let's just get going. Let's not stagnate in this project. Let's make something happen. And as long as everyone consents to that, we move forward with that. We try to do a project and put maybe the first step together. we see how it goes, we learn about each other, and then we modify and we change and we tweak and we fine tune and we fine tune and, you know, do the next step. And again, we fine tune. So the project can just keep growing in whatever direction it needs to go in. And this much more closely reflects human mentality and human psychology than a big, long project plan. Because now we can put lots of creativity, we can adapt to our environment as new people come in with new skills. Oh my God, Sophie, you know how to do this. Wow, that's going to be so amazing for our project. Wow, let's, you know, we don't, oh, sorry, Sophie, that's really incredible. But no, we've got a plan. This is what we're going to do. And yeah, forget your idea, even though it's fantastic. I mean, I wish we thought about it at the beginning, but we didn't. So come on, my God, wow, this is incredible. Yeah, let's bring it in. This is so enriching to our project. Let's go with it. And we can adapt. And then maybe someone leaves our project and takes a particular skill with them. And okay, so how do we adjust to that? So it allows our projects to continuously ebb and flow and change, but we still do it together. And that's the most important part of sociocracy, moving together. So we've got about 5-6 minutes. Any questions about sociocracy or about dragon dreaming? Alkis.
I might be taking too much space, and let me know if that's the case. I want to share the situation with you and see if it resonates. I am part of a group where we experience sort of a rebirth after a long dormant phase, and there were a bunch of us that wanted to actually like start implementing these principles of sociocracy. Part of this group is Zoe and anyhow people that did the sociocracy course with you. And like my question is kind of about transitioning of an existing group into sociocratic principles. Mm-hmm. Especially when the group is actually quite large to meet all at once, that every single person is there physically, then it's a mess to get things running, especially when you don't have an expert in sociocracy to show you the way.
For sure, implementing sociocracy can be very tricky, and especially the conventional forms of sociocracy can be very, very complicated to implement and really requires everyone to be trained up to really be able to do it well. The other really important aspect is that everyone needs to, or everyone should want to implement sociocracy. You know, everyone should be in agreement that yes, we are implementing sociocracy. Without that, it becomes difficult. So what I've done is I've reinvented sociocracy. Some of my students kind of lovingly call it Rakocracy. And which I find quite cheesy, a bit funny, but okay. We haven't got another name for it, so that will do for now. And what it does is it allows us to be really, really flexible, and it allows us to be, you know, to have meetings where whoever is interested, whoever is passionate, are the ones who make the decisions. But, and this is the absolutely essential, critical part, anyone who is affected by the decision must be invited to be part of that decision-making process. It's then their choice whether they participate or not, but they must be informed. They must be, you know, we must say, hey, Donna, this is going to affect you. Do you want to be part of the decision-making process? And then you can choose yes or no. And when you get sociocracy working, what it really does is it really builds trust. And so, you know, Donna or Courtney could say, you know what, finance team, I really trust you. So I know it's going to affect me, but I trust you absolutely. So I'm really happy for you to go ahead and make those proposals. Run it by me at the end, and I will, when you're finished with it, I will come to the meeting to give my consent or objection. But I'm really happy for you to go ahead and put the proposal together. The other thing, if you're so for example, if I implement it into a big organization which has many different departments, and it's going to be impossible, there's 500 people in this company, for example, there's no way I can teach everybody and get. What I'll do is I will train as many people as possible, and then I will find the departments where the most people are really passionate. And then the second round of training, very often they will send many of their colleagues along, and all of a sudden, if I've got like 90% of all the members from that department who've come on a course and said, wow, this is great, this is what we want to do, that's who I start with. I start with that group, and we have to recognize that, that the overall vision is actually the overall vision of the company, but we can't affect that. But that company, the overall company has given this department a particular goal, a particular deliverable. So we can work with that. We can start with that as the actual vision. Maybe the company has some kind of core values. So maybe we can bring that in and say, well, this is part of your culture, but do you want to make an even more creative culture as well? Something that you do as a group that really bonds you together, really allows you to really trust each other and work well. And then let's start making, all the other sociocratic decisions within that. What we find, and I can give a real life example of one particular company where I knew other people who also worked there, where they came to me afterwards and said, what have you done to these people? Like every morning they come in and they hug each other. Like, what? Like they're hugging each other before they start work. And then they're having so much fun. They're in in the meeting rooms, and we have to tell them to keep quiet because they're laughing so much. But they're really productive. They're really having fun, really enjoying working together. What have you done to these people? And then in this way, the next group says, oh, yeah, we'll explain. Oh, we'd like a piece of that. Yeah, why can't we? And bit by bit, you start, spreading it through the other parts of the company. And then maybe, especially if there's connections between the different departments, you can then start making, those kind of connections. And eventually, hopefully, maybe you can even spread it to the entire company. But if you try to impose it from the top downwards and say, no, it's never going to happen. Never going to happen. It's, yeah. So we've kind of run out of time. So
if you need a bit of time for questions, Rakesh, go for it.
Yeah, if there's a few more, because the next session is the joys of scything. So yeah, if there are one or two more questions, maybe we can answer that, but let's maybe not take more than, let's say, 10 minutes at the very, 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 very most, if that's okay. So any other questions about either Sociocracy or Dragon Dream? Donna.
Listening to you, it was very emotive, but I won't take up too much time. But it just reminded me of, I grew up in care, and I've worked a lot with young people that are leaving care, and especially my own experiences in the UK, is that we're programmed to be very isolated. It's not usual for us, if you've been in care, for young people, I'll talk about young people, to know how to connect with each other and other people, and also for trust. It's just crazy, I'm sure you can imagine. So I'm just, when I was running groups and in my own family raising my own kids, that's what we had was, or I thought was, right, does everyone agree with this? Was trying to introduce that idea, not as in the most beautiful way you just described it, but something near it. But it was very frightening, and it still is very frightening to some of the young people to have that intimacy, because that's what's created, is trust and intimacy. I just wonder, what your thoughts on that might be in terms of not wanting to impose doing, you know, with young people, but also sort of if someone is timid or frightened, and that usually comes out in an aggressive way, how to maybe encourage.
Very perceptive, very important. What I would say is that's not unique just to people in care. I would say many people in society do not have that love and have that opportunity. You know, we're taught right from the very beginning, from school, you know, about survival of the fittest, you know, that we must compete, we must be the best, we must competition. We're taught to be not to cooperate, but to actually compete against each other. And this leads to distrust. You look at a lot of the games, you know, like even on some of my permaculture courses, you know, face-to-face courses where we're living together for 2 weeks and things, people bring games, and very often they're really competitive, and I'm sorry, but I don't want to engage. That's not the world that I want to live in, where we're competing against each other. But it's harmless. It's harmless. It's just a piece of fun. Yeah, but it's still reinforcing this separation. This I must be better than you, and I must, you know, and it's not the world that I want to live in. And so while you may see it as being harmless, little bit of fun, it's reinforcing, and it's not encouraging us to really truly cooperate and help each other and support each other, and therefore to trust each other. And so I would say it's something that is not just unique to a particular group of people. It's pretty much everyone in society, in modern societies. So, and this is absolutely the biggest challenge that we face. So in learning sociocracy, the biggest challenge we have is how to completely break down that mentality, that cultural group mentality of competition, survival of the fittest, and how to really get people to trust each other. And the way that I try to do it is, for example, in anyone who's come to one of my face-to-face courses know that I always start with sociocracy. You know, if it's like a 2-week long course, we start off with the sociocracy workshop. We find out, well, why are people here? What needs to happen over these 2 weeks of the course to make this the most amazing 2 weeks of your life? And people express themselves, and we create a common vision around that. And then every single day, we keep checking in. Is this happening for you? Is there anything that's not working for you? And very often, what you'll find is people may even be too shy to say that in the big group immediately. So what we do is we get people into small groups, into what we call guilds. And at the end of each day, those small groups do various things together. So throughout the day, maybe as a group, they cook for everybody. The next day, maybe that same group cleans the space, of where the workshop's happening. Maybe the next day, maybe they're the ones who go and collect the firewood and the water so that we can cook, and so on and so forth. So they're constantly working together, doing things together, achieving things together, but they also reflect on the day. At the end of the day, they're looking at, what did we learn? What did we miss? What did we understand? Are there any, and also looking at your emotional, is there anything that's not working for you? So in that time, they can then express if something's not really working. They're much more likely, because they've bonded together as a little team. In a small group, they're much more likely to express one of their needs than in a bigger group. And so then anonymously, that group can come back and say, hey, there's one member of our team who is having this challenge. And then collectively, it's all of our responsibilities to solve that problem for them, because we really want to take care of everyone in the group. And so bit by bit, we show this love, we show this compassion towards each other. And one really quick example, a course that we actually did at Sophie's place in Bulgaria, where I think we had something like 27 people, and in a place which had no water, no electricity. It was approaching winter. It was really cold, and we had no sunshine. And it was a really challenging space. And we had 27, 28 people on this workshop. It was really incredible. One of the most fantastic courses, I have to say. Definitely one of the most memorable, and one which is really still brings so much joy to my heart remembering it. And there was one particular person, actually there was probably 3-4 people who didn't speak any English, so there was some translations going. There was one particular person who, he was from the army. He'd retired, but he was still fixing guns for a living. So this is, you know, he fixes guns for a living. He's been in the army all his life. It's all he's known. And he didn't speak a word of English. And when we, at the end of the course, when we did the kind of final wrap up, he said, you know, after 2 days, he said, I just wanted to leave. He said, the translation was terrible. Half of the things just weren't being translated. You guys were laughing so much. I didn't understand. And none of the jokes were ever translated. I didn't know, are you laughing at me? I didn't know what was going on. And he said, and then I saw men hugging men. And it's like, no, sorry, this is not my group. I'm out of here. I'm gone. And he said, you know, but you guys showed me so much love. I have never felt love like this ever in my life. And he started to cry. This army man, tough army man, started to cry in front of everybody, saying, I've never felt so much love in my life. He said, why do you need to leave? Give me your passports. I'll burn them right now. Why? Let's just stay together like this. Why do you have to go? And you could see, it was really clear for me the day that this changed for him, because I think around about day 5, he started to go off 5 o'clock in the morning, because I'm also wake up really early. I'd see him go off 5 o'clock in the morning into the forest and just start collecting wild foods, and just come back 2 hours later with so much wild food, and he'd just make breakfast for everybody. You know, this is how much love he wanted to show back to people. So it's about this trust. It's about really going out of the way, you know. So we heard him. We heard that the translation wasn't working. We fixed that. We tried different ways, and we kept checking it. Is it now working? Is it now working? Is it better now? Is there something else we can do? And we kept hearing him, kept you know, working with whatever challenges were coming up, so that we could continuously all collectively try to solve whatever challenges were coming up. And this is how you build trust. You show it. You believe in this love, you believe in this compassion, and you truly act on it, and people feel it. And this is what brings about change. So we also had an army, a police inspector on the same course as well, who ended up singing Don't Worry, Be Permy in English. He didn't speak a word of English, but there he is on film, singing along with everyone, even doing a little bit of a solo, singing Don't Worry, Be Permy. It's classic. I mean, what a joyful group. What an amazing course. So yeah, so it's about being honest, being genuine, and really not just talking about love, but really showing and giving love to people, and yeah, really hearing people, making sure that everyone is heard and that their needs are being met.
Yeah.
So
Maybe I can just add one thing as well, Rakesh. Also, yeah, it was beautiful to hear those stories again. And I think also, yeah, with like experience with young people, because I also used like Sociocracy, organizing groups with like projects with youth groups. What I also saw, like maybe what you're saying, that, you know, for young people who haven't been given like agency and like have never been asked like what they wanted, that's been taken away from them. It's really scary to be given that power. And I found that it's quite useful if you start with something small. So like around the food, for example, you know, everyone has this feeling that they would like to eat the food they'd like to eat. And it's like a small way that you can start by giving people power, where you say like, okay, in a group, rather than one person deciding, you know, together, we kind of, you have that as a little project, just how are we gonna organize the eating together? And it's a simple thing, but I think it can make a big difference when you start with something small, and then people slowly get used to kind of having that voice, rather than starting maybe with something very big, especially with young people who it would seem like quite scary to have that much power because they're not sure what will happen after what they say.
Brilliant, wonderful. And yeah, so again, part of anyone who's done any of my face-to-face courses know that's exactly what we do as well. We, it's the student's responsibility to feed everybody. So they work out what they're going to buy, where they're going to buy it from, how they're going to cook it, who's going to cook it, and so on and so forth. And it's totally, entirely their responsibility. In fact, what I say is that my responsibility is to facilitate the learning, the host's responsibility is the hosting, and the student's responsibility is to ensure that we have the most amazing, beautiful time ever. That's your responsibility, is to make sure that we create an energy and atmosphere where everyone can learn, everyone is taken care of, from their food needs, their sleeping needs, their whatever needs. That's your responsibility as students. So no one comes into this course passively. Everyone takes an active role in ensuring that the course is amazing, and people rise to the occasion, and it's phenomenal. It's really, really, really phenomenal. Giving them that trust. You know, it's a quite a different model compared to if you think about most courses you'll go to where everything is set up and everything is laid out for you. And no, not in my courses. Not in my courses. You are totally active, and your role is to make sure that we just have collectively a really amazing time. So, speaking of time, I think we've eaten away so much from the scything talk. So thank you all very much. I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who's going to talk about the joys of scything.
Thanks, Rakesh. Yeah, so maybe first, let's just get a little heads up from you guys as a group. Who of you knows what on earth is scything? You can just stick your hand up. Yeah, okay. Alkis doesn't know. Cool. So yeah, I don't know about the rest of you, but let's assume that you're not sticking your hands up. So yeah, basically scything is okay. Andreas is scything on Friday. Excellent. So maybe we're not such beginners. I'll give like an overview, and then maybe we'll take some time, if there is any, just to like share some scything experiences if you guys are already kind of like in the flow of it. Rakesh, are you there so I can share my screen? You've disappeared. Okay, I'll share some scything in action, but because, yeah, Rakesh disappeared, let's share some things that are actually in front of me. So in general, yeah, scything is, oh, I know what Rakesh has brought to the show and tell. Can you let me share the screen, Rakesh? So yeah, scything is one of my favorite things. It's something that is beautiful. Rakesh has got his, yeah, I didn't bring mine in because mine's on the handle. So I've just got a picture of it. But yeah, looking good. Yeah, it's something that I learned about since I moved to Bulgaria. So where I live, we manage about 1 hectare of land, which we're kind of developing bit by bit into a forest garden. We've also some areas for annual crops, but a lot of it we're also leaving as like natural meadow and allowing a lot of it to regenerate in its own way. So it's all land that was deforested and used for agriculture. So there's a kind of element of maintaining the forest garden and an element of also maintaining the meadows. So yeah, scything is a very beautiful, handheld, old-fashioned traditional way of cutting the grass. You have a head like Rakesh is showing there, and you have some kind of wooden handle. Let me see now. I'm going to share my screen. No, I still can't do it, Rakesh. Okay, cool. So yeah, let's put on here is a small film. We had some volunteers who had one of those like cameras that can do a stop frame. So if you can see that call there, you can kind of get an idea the scything. So this is me scything on the side of the swale with these volunteers that I'm teaching. So yeah, what you can see here is that you're like working in strips and going along the field. So there's different ways. If you're doing it in an open ground, what you have to remember is as you're scything, you want to start like at the edge of the area. So if you've got like a path or a boundary or an open area, especially when you've got long grass, this is the best bit of the film where I'm just on the top of the hill, like waving my hands around in a very funny way. But yeah, maybe I'll come back to that with the technique, but maybe it's better to start with just thinking about like why using a scythe is something interesting. So, you know, a lot of people when they're working with grass, they're using a lawnmower or they're using like a strimmer or something like that. And what you can see is, let's go into the picture. Yeah, this is my scythe here. So yeah, in terms of like comparing the tools, you've got like a lot of kind of like electric tools, mechanical tools, things like that, which people would imagine they're faster. But actually, once you've got like a good quality tool, you know how to use it and you keep it very sharp, you can actually be really efficient with it. They've done like tests of people like doing races with a lawnmower, races with a strimmer. And it's also something, you know, like if you can do something with a very simple tool that doesn't break, why complicate it? So like this, you don't need any petrol. It's not expensive. It's easy to transport. You can take the head off the handle and you can easily transport it. You can easily store it. You can also get handheld scythes. So you can do like small scything between plants. And it's very, for me, it's a very beautiful and meditative practice, actually. Because rather than like getting up in the morning, turning on a machine and just like drowning out the world with like this, you've got this very beautiful sound of like shoop, 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 as you're like very like sharp blade is like slicing through the grass that's like kind of like wet with the morning dew, because you want to be doing it in the morning when it's still like fresh and you've got this kind of moisture on the grass. Especially in Bulgaria where it can get very hot in the kind of grass cutting season, and once it gets dry it becomes a lot harder. So yeah, you have like all the kind of beautiful morning sounds of the day waking up and just this kind of like shoop, shoop, and you get into like a really nice rhythm, because as you could see in the film, you've got like the scythe in your hand and you're like swinging, so you've got this movement from the hip as you're going through the grass. So compared to yeah, like having all these kind of like electric tools and petrol powered tools, it's a very beautiful, quiet, simple thing that you can use. And yeah, you can use it in a lot of ways. So I'm using it, for example, one technique in the forest garden where I've got more trees and small plants close together. So in areas where I still haven't covered the ground, I'm using it like around the trees. I think here I have some pictures. So you can see here, we've got this like a lot of long grass going on in the place. And then you start to like clear out around the tree. So here, let's see, what I've done is you start kind of like making a nest around your tree and around whatever guilds you have. And yeah, like a really simple way of doing that is you first identify where's the outer circle of your tree or whatever plants, and you stay like kind of on one side of the tree. And as you're cutting, you're basically making a movement from like over your right side to your left. And as you're cutting, you're always throwing the grass to your left. So you always want to keep that in mind as you're moving, and to try and avoid stepping in the long grass as much as possible, because once you step it down, it's going to be much harder to cut. So the ideal height for the grass is like before it started to go over. So you want it when it's still like fairly straight. and growing upwards and not too matted if possible. If you've left it too long and it starts to get matted and goes down, then you kind of have to look at the nap a bit, like where you've got like kind of like hair or fabric going in different directions, and try and kind of walk in strange ways to kind of get under the grass. But like this with a tree, basically what you can be doing is you start on one side, and first you're cutting the grass away from the tree. So you go around in one direction in a circle, pulling the long grass away from the tree. And then you rotate opposite the other way, making a big circle of mulch around the tree. So that's one technique to avoid cutting the grass in straight lines and then moving it with a fork and mulching your tree. You just do this like circles. You go around one way, moving the grass away from the tree and cutting it, and then you go back the other way, and then you take a wider circle of grass, cut it, and make a bigger circle of mulch around the tree. So that's one way that's really nice if you're establishing trees in a kind of an open land and you want to just first focus on the trees as they're growing. And then let's go back up. Yeah, and then you can see here, so you end up just having like these big circles of trees with the big circles of grass with the cut grass in between. So not only if you helped your trees in that way by like getting rid of the competition from the grass, because you've also put this like big circle of mulch around, then you're stopping again other grass growing, and you're making a kind of living compost around your tree. So, you know, a lot of the time we talk about using like straw bales, and a lot of people assume that that's a kind of like a great material, or leaves and things for mulch. But when you've got that much grass, if you think about like all the nutrients in there, you've got this really rich material. So you can make these kind of huge circles around the trees, which then as they dry and break down, you're basically getting the leaching of all the nutrients from the grass back into the tree. So it's a really nice way of using the nutrients that have been taken out of the soil and just putting them back directly into place. So just cutting and putting it down. And then, yeah, another technique for working is if you have a big open area. So then what you want to be doing is you want to think about where you've got like, where you've got maybe a path or a bit of shorter grass, like what's your entrance point, and you want to have one line. So usually if you were doing like a field for hay, for example, or you're doing a meadow, you'll start like on a boundary line or where there's a path. And what you're doing is you're working, and you want to always be putting the long grass onto the cut grass. You don't ever want to be putting the cut grass over other long grass, because then it becomes a big mess. So you work on one way. So you're starting at the bottom of the field, for example, and you're cutting the grass and you're throwing it to your left. And you do a big strip going that way from one area to the other. And then you come back to where you started, and the area where you've cut the grass, it's been thrown to the left, and you now have a clear area there, and you move one strip across and you cut another line and you again throw it to the left. So what you end up doing in that way is you have like a lot of lines of cut grass that are laid out in rows, which you can then, this is like where it's used for making hay, and you would then turn it if you wanted to dry it and to use it as hay, or you could collect it immediately with a pitchfork, and then you would be able to, yeah, use it for mulching, use it for making like big piles of compost that you wanted to break down, mixing it with other materials, whatever you decided to do with it. But those would be like the two basic techniques, like going between the plants and cutting around them, or going through the field and then methodically cutting everything. So yeah, and in general, kind of thinking about like the timing of doing it. In terms of like meadow management, one of the things that is we've noticed a lot anyway in our place is since we've been scything the grass, that we've had like a much greater diversity of the kind of plants that we've got growing. So for example, when we first came, we noticed it was mostly just like a basic grass, because if you're leaving the grass, it's kind of the grass is standing and then it's like growing and it's falling and it's becoming matted, and you find that sometimes only the things that can come through are like the most kind of aggressive dominant species, which are kind of like normal ryegrasses. But once we started cutting it, what you do is you're kind of creating the opportunity for more things to come up. So we've noticed we've got now a lot more wildflowers, medicinal herbs. We've got naturally growing clovers and alfalfas. So generally, a kind of rule of thumb is if you've got like a piece of open land that you want to be encouraging diversity, you want kind of during the growing season, so between the late spring and the autumn, you want to be cutting it at least twice. And what we do is we do it in patches. So rather than cutting everything at once, and meaning that you kind of all the flowers are disappearing, what you want to do is you want to maybe like do one patch, which you're in that way kind of interrupting the life cycle of the plant. So you're stopping it going flowering to seed, everything at once. So you would have at that point a lot of flowers for pollinators, but then suddenly everything would be finished. Whereas if you do it in patches, you have one bit that will flower again because you've cut it, and then the other bit will be seeding. So we always leave it so in general the plants can kind of go through their whole life cycle, but in different patches. So that way we've always got things that are like coming into fresh flower. So we've got always a lot of like fresh clover and alfalfa flowering, but it's going in stages because we're working in patches. So we're doing like one area, then we're going through, then we're going through because we've got a whole hectare. And in that way, yeah, by the time we come back to do a second scything, then those plants have already got to a different point in their cycle. But yeah, if you're doing it on a smaller scale, you can also think about like maybe focusing on areas where you've got like just plain grass that you want to be prioritizing, like removing, leaving areas where you've got more unusual plants, leaving areas where you've got medicinal herbs, so that you kind of, rather than just like doing everything like a flat across, like just mowing all the lawn down, being like selective. So thinking about the diversity, so you allowing different things to come in. So in that way, with like kind of selective scything, I've allowed like a lot more diversity. When I find a plant that's unusual that I haven't seen before, that's quite rare, I always scythe around it. And like that, you notice like things kind of like starting like 1 or 2 plants one year, and then they self-seed, and then after that you end up with a lot more kind of plants that you've never seen before in the previous years suddenly becoming quite prevalent. And maybe the last thing I want to talk about, because we're running out of time, is just the importance of maintaining the tool. So one of the biggest problems that people have when they're scything is that it's not sharp enough. Your scythe needs to be really sharp. There's a reason why, yeah, death carries a scythe, because it can stop your life in one breath. So Rakesh has got like the more modern tool. I've got this that my friend who's a blacksmith made for me, and I've got this. So this is if you don't have a peening guide. This is one that you can stick in the ground. When there's 2 things you need to do with the tool. So you need to peen it, which is a way of hardening the metal. So you're hardening and thinning the metal. So you've got, when you buy the blade, it's got quite a blunt like cutting edge to it. And what you want to do is you have either something like this, which is your surface, and then you have the hammer, and you're hammering along the edge. And what you're doing like that is you're hardening the metal. So as you press it, the molecules are kind of going finer. So you're creating a very fine outer edge, but you're also hardening the metal. So you're tempering it with the hitting. So you're compressing it. So that's something that you need to do very regularly. So people have different ideas of how regularly you need to do it. Some people say you need to do it every time you go out there. You need to peen it first. Some people say once a week. But you need to make sure it's got a very sharp edge. And then as you're working, you always need to take a sharpening tool with you, and about every 15 minutes, resharpen it. So you have a sharpening stone. I couldn't find my sharpening stone, but it looks a bit like a kind of a long, thin loofah, like something you'd use on your feet. Have you got yours there, Rakesh?
It's downstairs. I can get it though.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you can look, if you look up sharpening stone, you can see it, but it's like a long, thin stone. And then what you want to do, you have like, as you're like sharpening a knife with a knife, so you take like your blade of your scythe and you take the stone, and then you're making like that. So you can have a wet stone and you're sharpening the scythe with it. And what you'll notice is when you have a really sharp scythe, Yeah, it's just so much easier when you've got like slightly wet grass with the dew on it and you've got a very sharp scythe. It like cuts like butter and it's really, really satisfying. But then the more that you're kind of struggling with it and your thing gets a bit blunt and you're kind of this, you'll just waste a lot of energy, and you notice that you're just kind of knocking the grass down rather than actually cutting it. And another thing I actually use, because you can have, yeah, this stone, but sometimes it's hard to get a really good finish. And what I also use is this, which is something very simple that's made for sharpening like household knives and scissors. And that's really simple because you just take the blade and you just make like this, like you could use for like sharpening your kitchen knives. It's something I wouldn't recommend if you have a really expensive scythe, because it tends to take off over time, like quite a lot of the width of the blade. Not quite a lot, but you notice your blade will start to reduce if you do a lot of scything. But if you have a kind of mid-range scythe and you just want to work quickly with it, and I'm left-handed, and I find like with the tool and the balancing and the doing this with the stone, I never get a very, very good sharpen with the stone. But since I use this, it's much faster for me, and then I'm just sharpening it like every 10-15 minutes, and it's a lot easier. So yeah, I think it's really important with the tool to like use something that like works for you, that's really practical. So with the peening, without a guide, it's quite hard because you always want to keep the same angle, or you end up with this like very wiggly blade. But that's the next thing I'm going to get, is a peening guide. So that's working. I think there's a picture here that I can just share, which is maybe an easy way to see it. Yeah, like this. So you've got the peening guide, you've got the part underneath that you balance the blade on, and then you've got the bit that's on top, and you basically like roll the blade kind of between the two pieces. So you've already got the same angle, you don't kind of end up with this wiggly angle, and then you're just tapping on the top. And so that's like just giving you the perfect guide so that you're always applying the same pressure, and you've got the angle of the blade correctly against the surface.
Yeah, you've actually got two which have very, very slightly different bevels on it. So
Yeah.
you can kind of, one helps to work and really stretch it, and the other one helps to also straighten it. And yeah, so you basically you do this first and then you do this second, and it really helps to, yeah. So as well as tempering it, you're kind of stretching it.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're hitting it, you're kind of,
you're pulling the molecules outwards, aren't you?
Yeah, pulling it out, and then you just need to clean off the burr at the other side, and that's it. It's actually, with this, it really makes it so much easier.
Yeah,
it's a really nice tool. Yeah, well worth getting if you're going to be doing this a lot. It really saves. I used to do it the old-fashioned way in Croatia. They would hang it on a string, and so with the whole handle as well, using the handle, they'd hang it on a string on a tree, and then you've just got this really loosely moving, so you're not carrying the weight of it. And then you use the same kind of anvil, and with the anvil, but you're not carrying the weight of the blade. The weight is hung by a string, and it's a really lovely activity, actually. It's a really nice, but doing it by hand, it's difficult to always maintain unless you get an anvil, which is, if you imagine, more or less the same height as your knees, so you can rest the blade on both of your knees and have that, so you make sure that it's straight, and then you kind of work across that way. That's another kind of technique.
Yeah, that's what we've done. What I was saying when you weren't here, Rakesh, as well, is another kind of hack. It's not very like craftsman-like, but it's something that if you find like you want to just begin, like rather than starting with a very expensive scythe and getting all the like the peening guides and things like that, you could try and get like a blade that's like a mid-range blade, and you can use something really simple like one of these that's like a knife sharpener, and that's also working quite well. You can get a very sharp edge on that. So that's something I do, especially when we have volunteers, because they can actually do more damage with peening and with a sharpening stone. I give them this, and it means that they're actually sharpening the tool regularly. So that's maybe something that's nice if people feel a bit like overwhelmed by like getting into sharpening things with special tools and things like that. It's kind of like an access point. So yeah, maybe the last thing I want to say is about the blade selection. You've got different ones. You've got like very big, long ones, which are meadow blades, and therefore they're for a very flat ground and for cutting a lot of mainly straight grass. So that's not something I'd recommend unless you have a very big field and you're basically cutting hay and you're going to do it at very correct timing. And then you've got like a mid-range one, which you can cut quite a lot of grass because it's quite long. So when you do a swing, you get a good quantity of grass. And that one, you can be a little bit more kind of off-road. It's not going to get damaged so much if it's a bit bumpy. And then you can get a ditch cutter, which is a short one. It's like stubbier and it's thicker and it's much stronger because you've got like less kind of leverage between the handle and the blade. And that one you can go, as the name suggests, in ditches. So you can do like kind of small edges, ditches. It can also take a bit thicker plants if you've got like kind of like scrubby bush that you're cutting. So yeah, for a lot of people, I would recommend something like the kind of either like a mid-sized one or like a ditch cutter, unless you're doing like a big meadow. But I have a mid-range one, and I managed to cut like small bushes. Like we have a lot of growth of sloe and things like that in places I don't want it, so you can cut off the regrowth of sloe with it. I managed to cut like on the mound of the swale with it. So yeah, it's something to experiment, but I would recommend, if you're new to it, not buying like the most expensive beautiful Austrian blade to begin with, and just like feeling more relaxed with a kind of a mid-range tool. Maybe buy a good wooden handle, and then you can put a different blade on it after a while when you're feeling a bit more relaxed.
Okay, wonderful. I think we should really, we've got 4 or 5 minutes to kind of wrap up. So
Yep.
I think maybe we'll call it a day there, and I'm going to stop